Good evening and welcome to the November 28th special meeting in Nacogdoches City Council. Mr. Bolden, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Let us bow a moment for prayer. Father, I pray that the holidays bring love, joy, and kindness to us all, and that we show it to a world that is broken and hurting. I know that peace comes from setting aside our own selfishness and being grateful for what we have, serving those with less, and considering others before ourselves. Father, I pray that the focus of the holidays this year be about you and your love for us, that we keep Jesus at the heart of our celebration, and as we continue to enjoy our holiday season, it is my hope that we will be blessed by these prayers, and as a result, are able to bless others. We should take time out to pray and allow God to give us the joy and peace we so desire. We love and trust you with all our hearts and soul. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. If you'll stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Do we have any open forums tonight? Okay, there being none, we'll go to the consent agenda.
Mayor, I'd ask that we remove agenda item 5A from the consent agenda for further consideration. And if there are no other removals, I'd make a motion that we approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Motion for the balance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Huckabee, on discussion, please.
Who's presenting that? Is it Mr. Offerman or Mr. Bartlett?
Mr. Offerman will joyfully do it.
I see the joy on his face. The reason I pulled this item from the agenda, you and I spoke yesterday about this item, engineering services for our ARPA projects. Can you tell me just in brief order what we're planning to do with those ARPA dollars as it relates to this project?
Okay, so back in earlier times with the ARPA funding, council allocated certain amounts to different categories. One of those categories was drainage, and we added to that amount. I think originally it was 1.5 million that council decided to allocate towards drainage improvements. With recent issues that we've had in our drainage system, in July of this year, this council upped that by another 1.4 million. And so we have a total of $2.9 million to spend on drainage improvements with ARPA dollars. And so Schomburg and Polk was one of two selected consultants that we have to do engineering services on ARPA related projects. This contract for Schomburg was specifically for drainage and sanitary sewer. And so, well, not this contract, but they have been selected to provide drainage and sanitary sewer services. This current contract tonight is only for drainage projects. So there's another contract that's forthcoming for sanitary sewer with Schomburg and Polk. There will be another contract coming with KSA, who was our other selected consultant for water improvements. And so drainage is this contract. It will include the projects we've talked about pretty extensively recently with Kenbook Drive and Colonial Drive. We also have several, half a dozen or more, pre-designed projects that 215 Consulting has done for us. 215 is working under Schomburg in this contract as a sub-consultant. And so this basically takes those pre-designed projects forward to construction and starts and completes the design and then construction for Kenbrook and Colonial. So
Thank you so much.
Sure.
The main point I wanted to make is we heard you, Kenbrook and Colonial. Drive. We're taking care of it, and we're using those ARPA dollars, and this is our first step to get that done. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
I just have a brief question. I know we have deadlines to use those ARPA dollars. Can you refresh my,
I believe that's the end of 2026, if I'm not mistaken.
okay, and we're on the path to use them all up, I know we are.
Yes.
But anyway, I also personally wanted to thank you for moving ahead on Kenbrook and Colonial. I know you've done a whole lot of work, and I know the residents appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, one question. Okay, in that group and that $1.9 million, I noticed on that list, Summer Hill was on there. Is Summer Hill included in your total projects?
I don't believe Summerhill was part of that package. It is, I don't believe, I'd have to go back and look, but I don't believe it was supposed to be in that. If it was, I don't believe it was.
Okay, because I think I'd seen where we had already we'd done something for that project.
We have engaged 215 Consulting on that as well. And so that was under design as well. So that was part of what we were trying to get bond money for. And so if it's not in the ARPA money, it would be part of the bond package money. So Summerhill does have improvements coming. I just don't believe it was in ARPA.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that whenever we get to that, as long as it's not in this one. Okay, that's good. Okay.
Make a motion, we approve agenda item 5A.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, now we'll go to the regular agenda. Presentation and recognition of the outgoing city engineer and public works director, Mr. Steve Bartlett. Come on up here, Steve. Congratulations. I don't know how many years it's been, but you've been here as long as I can remember. You're kind of like Theon Thompson. He was here forever. He knew where every pipe was busted, and you know the same thing. I got tickled. I was sitting home thumbing through Facebook one day, and this deer season had just started, and somebody taking a picture of Steve, and he had all of his meat stacked up on the back of his buggy, and he was hauling it in, fixing to have it dressed and everything. Anyway, you've done an incredible job for the city. Your knowledge of the engineering and where all the bones are buried in this town is, you're gonna be missed. We know you're gonna have a good time, and we'll probably have to call you back just because you know so much. Absolutely. Anyway, congratulations, and we really appreciate your service to this city for this year, all these years. Appreciate it. I'd like to thank also, you can thank, and with Rick and Keith, if it hadn't been for Benita, you'd have got a paper sack. Thank you very much.
Steve, I'm sorry, I forgot to add one other thing, and that's that all that has to do with fishing, and human resources staff selected so many things, but in case you didn't catch any fish, there are steaks in the freezer that you have to collect also. Sweet. Yeah, you can thank them.
Okay, next item, receive a report and hold a discussion and give staff direction regarding engineering timelines, for general obligation bond and utility infrastructure projects. Mr. Bartlett.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Steve Bartlett, I'm a fishing guide. Tonight, at your request, we wanted to give you kind of an update and an overview on schedules. You asked us what's next in the process of our bonds. We also had an extended discussion about future utility thoughts and what's next with that. So we'd like to just generally talk to you tonight about those schedules. It's not really a decision-oriented presentation. It's more of a where are we headed next. We asked John Martin, and also Michael Martin is here with Hilltop Securities, to come in first and kind of give us the financial, how do we turn bond propositions into money. And so he's gonna give us that timeline, and then I'll follow behind him and we'll talk some of the details.
Thanks, Steve. Mayor and Council, I'm John Martin with Hilltop. Thanks for having us this evening. And first of all, congratulations on the fantastic approval of every single bond proposition. Who knew? I mean, that's fantastic that went so well for you all, and what a great, long overweighted and needed step. So we're excited to help you all get started on all these projects, and we've provided a timeline to Steve, and kind of based on what he was telling us and backing into how the specs and so forth and bidding procedures from his side go. So if you look at that schedule that we have before you for the general obligation improvement bonds, we're assuming that we would issue all 44 million, all the propositions at one time. Now between now and the time, in the next 45 days, if you all want to push some of those off, if you want to do it all at once, that's great. If you want to take smaller chunks, you can do that too. It's up to you. So it's whatever is the most efficient way. Quick note on interest rates. They're going in the right direction for us, for borrowing. Short-term rates are continuing to be higher, so we have an inverted yield curve where short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. So it's when you issue these bonds and sell these bonds, get money in the bank, you're going to have a very nice return on the investment income of those proceeds. We're seeing like 20-year AA type credits being sold in the 4% range now. So that's well within what we had thought when we had put the numbers together for the when we call it the bond election. So things are very promising. In the last 30 days, 30 to 45 days, we've seen almost a 0.5% drop in tax-exempt interest rates. So it's a good time to borrow. I mean, we're kind of going in the right direction. A lot of people are saying that maybe the Fed is done with their inflation fighting, and that maybe we'll start to see a lot of the projections that Michael and I are seeing, internal and external, are that we might start seeing some lower rates starting in mid-2024. So it would be good to get that money invested for you, get the bonds sold while we can, and it's a good environment to do that. All that said, we'll start the process here, and the first thing that we have to do is to prepare an offering document. These will be public securities, tax-exempt bonds. So there is a public offering of these securities. We prepare that offering document, and in the bond world, that's called a preliminary official statement, or POS, and you see that referenced in the first item there. So that is what is prepared, that talks about the legal obligation of the city, your general promise to pay, you promise to levy a tax to repay these bonds. It also sets out a lot of economic and demographic information on the city, and we'll also use a lot of this information that we will send to S&P Global, that is the world's largest credit rating agency, to get a credit rating for you all, and we hope to maintain in that AA category that we've enjoyed. So once we start that process, we'll submit to S&P. We'll start getting the comments back from the underwriters that we together choose with staff and so forth. There'll be probably 3 or 4 different financial firms that will want to engage to help sell the bonds. We will not be doing that. We are the fiduciary for the city, so we would have a conflict if we sold your bonds. So we recommend to you, and we help you engage other parties to sell your bonds, and those are known as underwriting firms. So after and they will use that preliminary official statement to offer and sell those bonds, and we're targeting receiving the ratings there at the end of February, February 29th. It's a leap year. And then the underwriters would pre-market then the following week, March 4th, and then we'd come to you for your council meeting on Tuesday, March 5th. After that morning, pricing the bonds and finalizing all the details and coming to you with a bid, basically an offer to final pricing locked in. These are fixed rate bonds. They're not going to change. So you'll be locked in. There'll also be a feature in those bonds that you can redeem them prior to their redemption. You can call them prepay, if you will, without penalty. So after we do all that, the bonds are, the legal documents are put together by bond counsel, Norton Rose Fulbright out of Dallas. And they will submit that information to the Attorney General's office for approval. In Texas, all public debt instruments, to be a legal, valid, binding obligation, they have to have the opinion of the Attorney General's office. And also the papers have to be filed with the Comptroller's office as well. So bond counsel takes care of all that for you. They ask that they have at least 10 business days from the time they receive all the legal documents to the time we close. So as we back into that, we're setting March 27th, so the very end of March for money in the bank, and you guys can spend away after that, get your projects done. Happy to answer any questions.
I have one question. You don't think that there's any way that we could increase our rating?
Your credit rating?
Yeah.
I think it is possible.
Would that make any difference?
It could, yeah. I mean, it certainly could. I mean, you're in a very high, you're in some pretty high air, really, in that AA category. So, every little, you have AA minus, AA, and then AA plus, and then you get to AAA. I don't know that we'd get to that AAA category, but there is a chance, and there's maybe difference in AA and AA plus, maybe 5 basis points.
Yeah, depending on the market.
0.05 normally. As our rates go higher, that spread widens.
And the reason I've asked is I've pitched, when I was on the school board, I went to New York.
You've done that.
I've done it, and we were very successful. We increased our rating.
Yep.
And it made a big difference in what we did.
Well, and I think, the overwhelming approval of the voters speaks highly for that too. So you got the economic and demographic information that is pretty strong. Little to no debt, quite frankly, that the city has. Very little debt.
Right.
And the school district really, by comparison, does not have a lot of debt either, the county as well. So
Right.
your overall debt ratios are very low, and that's attractive to you. And then to have support of the community, that's something that we would play off of quite a bit too. So, but there's a possibility. We would encourage your involvement in that. You've been there and done that. Please, when we have set up these rating calls, that would be great.
Well, we'll need to decide. We have a city manager now, so I think it's worth it. I'm a pretty good salesman, I tell you.
Well,
I could sell,
Furniture.
I can sell anything if I
But it's
believe
nice
in it.
It's nice to have someone on these calls. I'm sure, in Rick's previous stint, he's done this once or twice, I'm sure, in terms of having these the rating calls and conference calls and even site visits. That, and then even after that, there'll be periodic follow-ups from the rating agencies. But it's always good, Mayor, to have someone that has been there and lived in the community and knows a lot of the history there. So I don't have that. He's new too. So, I mean, it would be helpful to have someone like you involved.
Okay.
And any other.
I think it's worth investigating.
Yeah.
If we can, I don't care how many basis points it is, if it benefits the city and.
Go for it.
and
Absolutely.
All they can do is say no.
Yeah,
What have we lost?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, and
So-
Michael will tell you, every call we end with them, we always ask for an upgrade regardless.
Right.
All they can do is say no.
Right. We've got Zoom now, and we can make a nice presentation.
Right.
And let them know
And
who
we'll
we
help you
are.
put that together, absolutely.
Perfect, okay. I'm sorry to take some time.
No. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll borrow the whole amount at the beginning, or would we, at one point, I think somebody said you could stagger it and that way save? How do,
So you could, I mean, you could stagger it. You know, a lot of that depends on, and I don't want to steal Mr. Bartlett's thunder too, because I mean, a lot of that is going to be, you know, in terms of how his timing has worked out and so forth. You want to make sure, you can't award a contract unless you have the money, right? So, that's the key there. So you don't want to get too far out in front of that. Keep in mind, every time you issue bonds, you have to pay the rating agencies, you have to pay us, you have to pay the lawyers, you have to pay everybody all over again. So it's best just to do that once.
okay.
Yeah, if you don't take it all at one time, does the interest rate, you said it was locked in?
You're locked in if you know, each time you sell bonds, it's a fixed rate bond. But
it's
you'll
fixed rate,
you'll have
okay.
market risk. I mean, interest rate, you know, they
Yeah,
could go either
that's
way.
what my concern would be if we didn't get
Yeah.
with this one.
They could go up. We're coming into a political climate year, so anything can happen.
But when we have the dollars, we also can invest them and get. and
Exactly.
Get interest on them.
You're not
That's right.
spending one penny till
Right.
it's needed, so that money is sitting there making,
The tax code allows you to at least earn what you're paying.
Right.
So if you sell bonds at 4.5%, then you can earn 4.5%. So basically, it doesn't cost you anything.
Can't earn 5%.
Well, you can. You just have to send it back to Uncle Sam.
Thank you.
thank you very much, sir.
You bet.
Thank you.
So we've kind of got, and I'm going to call it a tentative schedule because we had to make a lot of assumptions. So I want you to know we are trying to judge at getting all this kicked off at once. You can, again, as you heard, vary that process, but this is all assuming that we light all the fires together. So when you see this, it's a very compressed schedule in that regard. So basically, in the first quarter, we turn bond propositions into money, as you heard. And at the same time, and in parallel with that, we'd like to begin our process of procuring engineers and architects and environmental firms and surveyors. That is more than a one-day process, so it's going to take the engineering department quite a while to go through those requests for qualifications. We have a sample. You asked for a sample of one of those. We've got that prepared, and we will email that to you. It wasn't necessary for presentation tonight, but it'll show you kind of how we solicit engineers and architects, how we like to score them, and depending on the project, we change the scoring criteria and the requirements, so that varies. But it'll give you some flavor of what we will be turning out. Generally, that's a multi-week process. For a bigger project, we'll have about 3 weeks where we solicit and maybe 3 weeks where we're scoring and selecting, and then we'll move into a contract negotiation phase. So you may wonder why some of these timeframes for engineers and architects are 60 days versus 120 days, because we have a different process depending on whether it's an architect or an engineer and how complicated and big the project is. So some of these contract negotiations take us several months because their attorneys and our attorneys and the contracts themselves ping back and forth on sometimes just minutia, but it does eat up some time. So generally in the first quarter and leaking a little into the second quarter, we'd like to begin that process. And we can, engineering can come and give you additional information at another time, but I want to remind you that the solicitation of architects and engineers and surveyors is not a bid. It's, we're forbidden by law to bid, so we have to take the most qualified candidates. So we will literally request qualifications and evaluate their statement of qualifications, and we will select them without the benefit of pricing. Pricing is a negotiation after they've been selected. If we cannot achieve an agreement on pricing that's reasonable, then we move to our second choice. We dismiss them. So it is literally not a bid, so you will not see bid tabulations from us. As the engineering community loves to tell you, you know, you don't want the cheapest brain surgeon. And so we like to pretend that applies to us too. So we negotiate for the most qualified, not necessarily the least expensive. But we are very cognizant that these dollars need to go towards construction and as little as possible towards administrative cost. Just so that you can, and you kind of saw a little flavor of that tonight with Case's ARPA contract presentation, but you're going to see engineering and architecture and all these fees range between 10 and easily 20% of your construction costs. So you are going to see some big numbers and big contracts coming to you. And that's kind of unusual because most of our projects have been smaller than that. And you've seen smaller fees. We've been to you with $75,000 and $150,000, which is a lot of money. You're going to see things significantly larger than that for multi-million-dollar projects. So kind of prepare your brain for that a little. So we hope to get all those consultants positioned, have contracts there. Jerry will be working every day on those contracts. We do have some good contract forms that we're going to use, but each firm is a little individual. We would like to then, that will kind of precede the first phase of design. And so we would like to then begin design in the second quarter generally. We would look at our fire station design. Mr. Kiplinger and I sat down and kind of thought through this process, and since we have 3 stations we'd like to build, they have requested that we look at the larger station first, and just for logistics reasons, and look at and not only acquiring the site for that, but beginning the schematic design process. So we've shown you going in and doing a schematic design for all 3 stations, because we need to kind of know how big and where they are. We really haven't done that. What we did during the CNAC meetings was come up with a make-believe station, and I don't think it was bizarre or off, but it's not our final design. So now we will do that and find out exactly what kind of site we need to house those stations, and then we would like to start the design process on the new central station, the larger facility, and then follow that with the 2 smaller stations, because they're going to be very close in nature in design. We think we could design those in parallel, and so you'll see those are kind of grouped together, and then move straight into the construction. The overall thought is on fire stations that we would begin in spring of '24 and hopefully finish construction towards the end of '26. And that's, I hope, true but optimistic. I've never seen construction come short. It's always come long. So we're hoping by the end of '26 we can actually have those facilities in operation. Storm drainage and sidewalks, we've combined that into one. It was 2 separate propositions, but as far as contracting engineers, it's the same kind of civil engineer that does storm drainage, can also design sidewalk projects. So we'd like to combine that into one engineering effort. It will be obviously can be multiple bids and projects. And we again will be working on that in the second, third, and fourth quarter to try to get some of those done. Some of those projects, as Case told you, are pre-designed and some are yet to be designed. And to answer your earlier question, Summer Hill is in this group of it. We removed it from the ARPA to free up some funds to hit some of these new priority ones in Kenbrook and Colonial Hills. And not knowing exactly what that cost is, we wanted some room. So it's important, but we felt like it could be funded here and kind of wait till this time frame to do it, to answer that question. So storm drainage and sidewalks will begin and go on in through mid-2023. The cemetery building is a relatively straightforward design build project, so as soon as we get an architect hired, we'll fire it up and build that, and hopefully be in due early '25. We'll have that finished.
Can I
The
ask
parks.
one question, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay, on that. Okay, so if we do these all in one bond, you're talking about 20-year bond, right? Okay. All right, you got a $425,000 project on a 20-year bond.
So while there are a number of propositions, what we're gonna do is we'll combine all those. We'll have to internally segregate those out, because that money has to stay within each proposition.
Right.
So, so the streets will have to be self-contained, and the fire stations will have to be self-contained and all that. So we will have kind of in its own, you'll have your own debt schedule that will have each of those projects' debt service requirements and and then we'll combine it into one offering. So you don't have 8 different 6 or 7, 8 different bond issues. So some of that will amortize in 10 years, right? So I think the cemetery and parks,
Well, and the streets are going to be a shorter.
they were 10.
Okay,
yeah.
good. That's
Yeah.
all I wanted to know.
Yeah,
is-
yeah.
is if we, I just hate $425,000 project,
Right.
and then you
Yeah, it's
do it over 20
average
years.
useful life of the asset,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
No, and that's a good question. So I think those schedules will be tailored towards the life of the asset. And again, I'm being silly. You don't want to finance streets for 40 years because in 20, I'll be rebuilding that street. So I think all that will be crafted with John's help to where it's reasonable return period for each one of those. So parks facilities, again, starting in the same kind of time frame. The restrooms are designed. So Army Curtis, our local architects, has designed a unified restroom. So this will be a matter of just hiring an architect to look at the site planning, where they go, getting the utilities hooked up to them, and at the same time, with the Parks Board's help, we'll begin to look at playgrounds. What they've done in the past with playgrounds is actually gone through the buy board, as you recall, which is our structured no bid process where we've got a qualified state contracts. And they'll look at playgrounds and negotiate, here's what we got to spend, and they'll come back with design build options. So we felt like we could do both of those at the same time, get the restrooms underway, get the playgrounds going, and then go out and put those on the ground. That's why you see both of those constructions concurrent. We think it can happen that way. So lastly, street improvements. Interestingly, why did we break it up into 3 contracts? And we did. So we visited with some of our local area larger paving contractors, and they, when I say larger, they do TxDOT style projects. They have got quite a bit of staff, but we asked them in a city environment, how much could you bite off at one time and be reasonable? And realize it's a lower number than what you see on highways, and the reason is they get a 10-mile highway project and they just go in a straight line, and it's a very efficient way to put all your crews and your stuff down. In a city, they're mobilizing all over town, they're doing detours, they're shutting down, they're working with difficult schedules, and so it is slower and more tedious in a city environment. So the number we got back on average was about $3 or $3.5 million dollar bites at this. If you recall, we typically are turning out about $1 million bites, and we spend 6, 7 months, sometimes 8 months doing that. So we've broken this up in about $3 million tranches, and we are just gonna put them out in 3 different periods. So I will tell you, our intention right now is to do all this engineering internally and to bid this out internally and try to save the money on consultants on that. Mr. Opperman has done that since he's come here early. It's kind of been his specialty. So I think if we break it up like this, Case and Jason will be able to put this out internally and put these out in 3 different project series. And that's why you see those kind of trailing out. Remember, this time of year, it's hard to pave. So we're going to schedule them, as you can see, where we can do it in paving weather, and then we'll probably have a rest because I really don't like to make asphalt when it's freezing outside. So anyway, again, I want to stress that these are my best judgment, ideas. We put all of our heads together. We talk to contractors. Things will change, and we'll keep this schedule updated. This is optimistic, and it's compressed. If you choose to spread it out, if you choose to change the process, we're here to do it. We just need to know by the first of the year, because we're going to start to hire engineers. We'll need funds to pay those contracts before we issue them. And so this gives you probably your shortest time frame possible. So let me handle questions on this and then move to the other one, if that's okay.
I have one. Now, we're gonna borrow whatever the bond said, right?
Yeah, if you choose.
Yeah, okay. So when that money's over, it's over, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so okay.
We wish we could figure out how to get more.
I know it, but, okay.
So,
Are we going to be limited to internal resources as to how we schedule projects? Because everybody's going to be involved, city manager, engineering, even Jerry, the schedule. Are we limited for resources as to how we schedule projects?
So we are. We have none of those projects going now, Mr. Bolden, and we have full-time jobs, so you're absolutely correct. So we do think we can do some of this in-house, so I'm not telling you we can't, but what you will probably hear from Case and Jason is that they would like to hire a firm just to help them do project management. It's not unusual at all. TxDOT works that way. A lot of large companies work that way. So they'll hire a general engineering consultant, which is kind of pseudo staff, and they can help us. They can work in here. They can work remote, but they literally help us hire engineers, oversee construction, the whole bit. So they kind of play our role, and I think that you will hear that we would like to do that to help us supplement the staff. If not, the other alternative is to add FTEs, and which means is a forever thing. And so we think this is a much more efficient way is to get some outside consultant help, not to design, but to manage the design. Does that answer your question,
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Bolden?
you.
Streets that are gonna be improved, right, Case?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed that there's a public meeting for sidewalks.
Yes.
Is that another vote, or what is
No,
that?
no, it isn't. And so, it's a good question, thank you. So when sidewalks came up as a proposition from the CNAC committee, there wasn't necessarily a hit list of priority sidewalks. Now, we've had some public meetings in the past, Mr. Mall. But we felt like it would be appropriate to have a new public meeting or two and let the community come and refresh us on where the priority sidewalks are. So we've got about 1.43 million in sidewalks. We've agreed to dedicate, near $500,000 of that to the downtown area, and it could be more, y'all. But we've got some access issues, as you know, downtown. And so in round numbers, $1 million to go put sidewalks elsewhere. That might buy a mile, mile and a half of sidewalks, so it's not huge. But we thought we'd hold some public meetings, get input on where the placement of that might be the best use of those dollars, and then move forward and design those specifically, if that makes sense.
Yes, there's Rick.
And Steve, remember, we have had another meeting with TxDOT as well, and we're gonna have a follow-up meeting, probably, knowing the holidays are there, probably right after the holidays. But on system, there's also an opportunity for TxDOT to participate. So with that public meeting, with the TxDOT input and the bond funds, I suspect we're going to be able to cover probably more than y'all are seeing right here.
And TxDOT's been great in the past about funding these sidewalk projects you see that give us a lot of phone calls sometimes while they're under construction, but they're all good projects. But they are on system, as they say, or on TxDOT roads. A lot of the public doesn't know which roads are which around here. And so I think if we do this public meeting, we'll have feedback for both on-system roads and city streets. And so we'd like to just bundle all that up and kind of have our latest and greatest list of sidewalk priorities. And I hope we can carry that forward over the next budget years and maybe look at some other and additional funding opportunities. We're always looking for grants and other things too, certainly. So that list will help us with other fundings other than this bond. So.
Thank you.
And Mr. Beverlin, you've had experience in securing additional dollars for these kinds of projects too.
And so that would also be where we would look at probably our partners like Brazos Transit and also probably our congressional delegation as well. And if we have opportunities to tap things on the transit side, the enhancement side, which are discretionary costs for projects from TxDOT, and then also just their on-system pot of money. So we're gonna go after every nook and cranny on what we're eligible for.
And these bond dollars we have can be used to bring down other dollars possibly?
They could possibly be used for match, and the other one is, I'll also throw out, CDBG is one category of federal funds that are allowed to be used to match other federal funds. Most people forget that as well. So, again, you can leverage, and that's what we're gonna do.
Great.
And that's a good segue into the last item on here, which is airport, because I did not show you a schedule for airport. And so Mr. Smith and I have been talking. He's been very active in working with TxDOT Aviation and really through the FAA in potential projects, identifying and seeking those monies. As you recall, you passed a resolution requiring match dollars. And so because that is uncertain exactly how that will unfold, I do not have a schedule for you other than we're gonna do something. And so we'll let you know as that develops more. But obviously the grant TxDOT side of that is the big component that we need to give you scheduling, and that's still hanging out there as we seek these grants. So we'll keep you updated on that part of it. But I think there's a lot of possibilities there to use Rick's exact words to leverage a lot more money with what we've got, and that's what we did. A lot of the stuff out there is 90-10 and 50-50. That's a great leverage. It's a great leverage. So, any other questions on this part?
So, Mr. Bolden kind of stole my thunder because I was going to ask the bandwidth question myself. But as we move into this next discussion, you talk about having project management for these general obligation projects. Is that also something that you're going to need as you move forward for the utility fund? But I know we're splitting it up, but there is some overlap, right?
Yeah, I think it's all going to be happening in the same time frame. Absolutely, Mr. Huckabee. So I would think the answer is yes. And the hiring of those folks, we could basically use them for whatever purposes that we need. So I would suspect as we develop the utility part of this more, and as you guys all know, we're developing as we started last meeting. So as we see what the time schedules and the dollars are, then I think, yes, you'll find that we'll need some either additional staff or some help in that realm as well. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
It's a whole lot for a group that generally eats a couple, $3 million of projects a year. We're gonna be eating, 20 times that. And so we've got to figure out how to keep all that on task in a relatively short period. So I think consultants are gonna have to help us.
And that's why you're retiring, right?
Okay, I'm gonna move forward to the next, and this was just, I thought it was just a good time to tail this in since we're looking at critical path schedules. So you asked us last time to take a look at, so kind of give us an idea of what the utilities, needs are, and so I kind of broke this up. The rate modeling, we're hoping that by February, we can kind of have that all polished up. There'll be some back and forth and some models and answers generated before that. But to let you know, I think it's gonna kind of go through that duration to let us look at some what-if scenarios with water rates. Remember, our water rates, and I know we had discussions on increases and the impacts of those increases, but every year the cost of chlorine goes up, every year the cost of a pump goes up. And so there's probably not a scenario where our costs don't rise annually, not even counting labor costs, which certainly go up as well. So I think water rates, just to maintain our status quo with what we're serving today, the cost for that goes up. Water rates will subsequently have to follow that. And as I showed you last time, we're coming close to break even, depending on how much we sell. So we don't have a huge excess to apply. And we shouldn't. We should be charging rates that get us close to operational cost and a little capital savings. So we'll work on the rate model. It'll give us some more answers that you'll be involved in hearing those answers. I kind of bundled the ARPA stuff that Case, began a discussion with you on a while ago. The money does have to be obligated. That means contracts signed by the end of '26. And so, in construction by the end of '26, and contracts signed by the end of '24. And so we are underway. So you see, the schedule meets that. We're gonna have to hustle to get there, but I think we can do it, because at least some grabs of these are designed already, so we're gonna be on the ground. We are today. Your ARPA dollars are what's blocking you at Logansport and Park Street, so we're spending that on the storm drain project, which is going fairly well, by the way, for a complicated area.
Depends
Except for
where you
gas lines.
live.
Except for gas lines.
She ain't got any gas.
I heard that. I heard that. So we're real pleased, not to take a left turn, but we're tied in behind the church, and we're able, we think now, to handle more severe storm events, which was our big risk. And so my good friend and ex-partner John Wyndham is here, who's been their board of directors, and he's breathing a sigh of relief from that, I'm sure, because that's his church, so.
Being back
He's
there.
nodding and waving. He pointed his finger at me probably, but.
Can I ask, when will it be done?
So our target was early January, to be finished early January. We've had a couple of setbacks, just things that were in the way, but not huge, that have cost us a week or so, or 10 days. So I think we're still, gas lines, correct. And so I think we're still in that early January target. We've got to turn the corner and come down Mound and work on some detouring, not closure, but detouring of Mound. And that will be a little arduous, because they're going to work with live traffic over there on part of it. So, but we're still hoping in early January to be out. We'll follow that up with some, what I'm going to call temporary paving. It's a cold patch paving, because in January, you're not going to probably get hot mix asphalt. And so we'll try to make it a trafficable street. And then our folks will come back in the spring and actually repave all that and make it look nice again. So, but it is successful in our contractor Duplachain. I think is doing very well in a kind of a very tedious little spider web of utilities there. Moses put some of those in. It's kind of tough. So, I put on here, we do have some cash, as you saw last time. We got some projects in our CIP, some water and sewer things we want to go do. We've got money to go do them, and they're programmed. You've approved those in the CIP already, and so we will be going through the same engineering firm acquisition and construction phases, and we'd like to also have that underway. And to your point, Mr. Huckabee, same time frame as we're doing the others, and so exactly right. So that'll be an additional juggle of the same exact things, engineers and contractors. So lastly, I put together kind of my thoughts on the Lanana and Banana Creek. See, they did it. I said it. Lanana and, so we just call it Banana Creek. It's a lot easier. It's the sewer line replacement projects along both creeks. We are treating those kind of as a project that we would bid together, even if we had multiple contractors and even multiple engineers helping us do designs. But I wanted to give you a feeling, because that's a big boy project, and it's going to take a while. And we think we've got a pretty good acquisition phase in there. And so you can see we would like to begin, with your permission, and it's kind of what we brought to you last time, is we'd like to begin to solicit engineers with that. In fact, the the RFQ I'm gonna send you as an example is in fact for this engineering, so it's one we had bolted together, and that's what you'll read. So we'd like to begin that process if we can, very early in January, and solicit. Middle December is not a good time to solicit anybody, so we'd like to start early January if you would allow, and then begin the design. And about halfway through design, we think we'll be far enough along schematically to begin the easement acquisition part of it. We need to know exactly where it's gonna go and who the landowners are and survey before we can do that. So that'll happen about halfway through the design. We'll have that nailed, and we'll begin that process. Once the acquisition is complete, we think we can go to construction. And as you can see, we're targeting November 26th and finishing, November 29. So about a three-year run. And those things can slip, but that's my best, shortest timeframe judgment on it, so. I put down there revenue bond, if we move forward and however, whether you do committees or council or staff, and you have discussion on revenue bonds, and that's not today's decision, but I wanted to show you where in time that occurs, and it would have to occur somewhere right before we start construction, because we would be obligating. Why not before engineering? Because we already have the cash to pay for all that in CIP. So normally, on the general obligation bonds, we need the money to contract with engineers. In this case, we don't. So we would want to have a revenue bond somewhere in the late 26, early 27 timeframe to start construction. And that's kind of the timeline we showed you before, that if we need financing, it'll probably realistically be in about 3 years from now. So anyway, these are best stabs at it. I'm happy to answer questions on utilities if you have. Pretty exciting stuff.
So the Lanana and Bonita Creeks sewer engineering, or the lines themselves, don't go along the same easements that you had before? Is there new easements?
So the answer is yes in some places and no in others. So part of the problem, Mr. Mall, we had, as you know, we've dropped that sewer line in the creek more than once because it is immediately adjacent to the creek.
Is the creek changing as
The
floods come?
the creek moves and changes a little bit and washes out. That's why we lost the line, actually. The line got undermined and went into the creek. So we would like, in some areas where it's very close and adjacent, to move it over a safe distance, whatever that is, a safe distance, maybe 50 feet, 75 feet. There are other areas where we're just going across a field or across country. We may be able to utilize the same easements. Each of the easement documents that we have from those landowners has to be examined, because some of them don't allow a second line. Some of them don't.
That's what I was
Yeah,
wondering.
they
Are
don't.
you gonna have to be negotiating? And sometimes people hold stuff up for years trying to.
Yes, and so
Hold
I
on
think
to
each of them
land.
have a negotiation. Now, we're gonna have to quantify all that. So this design helps me figure out which easements we can use, which we need to go get new. And once we do that, we'll start to seek those out one by one, because there could easily be 80 or 100 easements that we have to acquire. And that's why this acquisition timeframe is so long. One of the consultants we'll hire will be somebody that just goes out and gets these easements for us. And also a surveyor who goes out and prepares the plats and surveys the easements. So I don't know exactly how all that lands. We have preliminary engineering completed for both lines. It's a very detailed report, not just a picture, and quantifies all this. It's how we got really good cost numbers we presented to you. And there is an alignment in that document. So we've got a pretty good early alignment, but we've got to start comparing that with old easement documents. So I think the answer is going to be all the above. We'll be able to use some of the old easements. We'll have to buy some new easements and abandon old ones. And then some of them we may have to widen. Some of them may have just have been 15 feet, and we'll probably need to buy some additional room. So
If there's another big 100-year event or something, is it gonna hurt these lines, or are they impenetrable, like, because they're new?
no, I
I mean,
think,
as the creek changes and as floods happen, should it be further out, or what's?
so the new design will move it further away from the creek. We'll move it what we're going to consider a safe and fair distance away from the creek to provide. The theory that you'll see in the preliminary engineering report, and I'll send that to you, is basically a 100-year kind of design. So we want pipe and thought for about 100-year of stability. Sounds like a long time and sounds optimistic, but we want to have things far enough away that we can build, far enough away that our creeks don't erode. And so, yes, I hope we're going to eliminate that kind of failure. Do sewer lines fail? Sure, there's always a problem. And will these get flooded? Yes, they're going to be in the floodplain when we build them. And so we have ways to build the manholes where they're sealed and hopefully not take on a lot of inflow and infiltration, and let the sewer line kind of be isolated from the flood. And we have a number of lines right now that are under floodplain, and we just seal the lids So, but I agree, we need to go further, and hopefully this will bulletproof most of it from that impact. Yes,
So
sir.
if you expand it, does that mean that you could, in theory, use it for trails or parkland or something like that? Or is it go back to the owner?
No, so one discussion has been, because this generally goes along the trails on
And
Banana.
people love the
Banana,
trails,
yeah,
so I was just
is
wondering,
to
maybe
use
you
them as
got more tra-
cooperatively for both. And so the easements that we write, the new easements that we write will certainly give us the right to put trails on that and use it for access. That's probably almost built into that anyway, we can get on them, but specifically to have people on trails and have a trail surface, I think Jerry and I would build that into the document, so it's probably more specific. The ones, if we use existing ones, then it's probably worthwhile to go back and make sure those are at least amply supported and maybe do a mod with them, so.
I was just thinking a little more bang for our buck.
I agree. I think it's a perfect alignment for trails, bike paths, the whole bit, so. Like I say, I think we blend all that together and kind of get that as, I would say a freebie, nothing's free, but almost a freebie out of it, and be able to use those trails for those paths, at least in most places,
I
not
think
all
if
of
we
them are
think
feasible.
ahead while we're doing all this engineering, that
Agreed.
might be a
Agreed.
money-saving great
Yeah,
benefit.
I totally agree, and we've kind of had that concept from the beginning, that it needs to have a recreational component. It's not unusual. See, I did it. A lot of cities, I know, I do.
And
So,
Steve, on the
combine 'em.
quick question, when they'd be in the design phase and the right-of-way acquisition, won't they also potentially be able to use USGS, Atlas 14, FEMA data, and see where you've got your accreting and your eroding sides, and maybe based on that, kind of a model theoretically?
Sure.
Okay, we're 50 years out, 75 years out, you're still good.
Right.
And use that kind of as a basis. Because I
Erosion
think you
control
ought to be able to
modeling
use
is what
that, the
he's talking
erosion,
Yeah,
erosion.
modeling, yeah.
So that should probably be some of their inputs, I would hope. So if they could just kind of plan on that, that would.
Agreed, no, agreed, I think we have that analysis. And in some areas, we got limited room. If we move it over 200 feet, in some areas, we're in the middle of a shopping center, and that's not practical either. So I think it's a balance of all these things. But yeah, we'd like to bulletproof it. We'd like to use pipe materials that aren't concrete and fall apart with sewer gas, and so we hope all this puts it into where none of us use the term banana again, so.
I like this leveraging.
So leveraging is pretty good.
It's good. Good questions.
Any other questions, council? Well, thank you very much, and thank you for tonight. I appreciate all your comments.
Was that your last presentation?
Amen.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Very much. Okay, thank you, Steve, again, and enjoy your retirement and your deer killing and your fishing and. Okay, next item, item 6C, consider approval of a resolution for the formation of a capital needs advisory committee for the purpose of evaluating the utility system needs of the city of Nacogdoches and making recommendations to the city council regarding the potential funding options and discuss the appointment and the initial members of the committee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jerry Baker, City Attorney. You have before you a proposed resolution based on the presentation that Mr. Bartlett made at the last city council meeting. As you recall, the city engineer identified certain water line and sewer line projects that are really exceed our current cash. And so at that time, there was some discussion among the council about restarting or rebooting our capital needs advisory committee that helped with the bonds before. And so what you have before you is the proposed resolution to essentially do that. As you will see in section 1 of the resolution, the purpose of this capital needs advisory committee is for the purpose of evaluating the utility system needs of the city and making recommendations to city council regarding those needs and how to fund them. You'll see the tasks that are being assigned to the committee set forth in section 2. And then you'll see that the committee will consist of members appointed by the council under section 3, that the city manager will appoint a staff member as the committee liaison under section 4, and that the city council will appoint a chair and vice chair to the committee. This committee is to abide by the Texas Open Meetings Act under section 7. And the council is given the opportunity to remove members of the council for various reasons as laid out in section 6 of the resolution. You will also see an Exhibit 2, the resolution, which has a list of some names that have been identified from the prior committee who have reached out to Mr. Bartlett and agreed to serve once again on the committee, as well as some additional names that have been added by the mayor and other members of the council. This is not a definitive list by any means. It's just a way to present this to the council and let the council determine, as stated there in the agenda, to discuss and appoint the initial members of the council. So that's another part of this agenda item. So first we have the resolution, and secondly, to appoint the initial membership of the council. So if the council has any questions, I'll be willing to answer those this time.
Mr. Baker, with regard to Section 6, you and I spoke this afternoon. It mentions specifically that any member of the committee who files or announces candidacy for city office would automatically be removed from the committee unless was specifically voted on by the city council. Our original intent, I think, with the last one, as you and I discussed, was that that would only apply to members that were not on the council.
Correct.
And I assume that would be our intent on this one also. If we appoint members of the council, that they would not have to resign if they decide to run for office in the city.
I would anticipate that would be what the council would desire. If we need to, we can tweak that language to make that clear. But I would recommend that if council members are going to be appointed to that committee, that if they are in the process of running for the committee, they wouldn't automatically be removed and then you're back trying to appoint another member to the council at that time. And so we can, it's up to the council how we can tweak that, and based on your recommendation tonight, or leave it as is with the understanding that that's not going to be possible for those members who are currently on the city council.
So the first thing you need is a motion to accept the resolution, right?
Well, no, I still have some questions.
Okay, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
On several other things. I don't know if anybody else has
No,
questions.
that wasn't a comment, that was a
Okay.
question.
So let me understand this. So Section 6 really needs to be clarified a little bit. Is that correct? If it's,
Based on the comments by Councilman Huckabee, I would say we probably need to put some language in there just to make it clear that the current members of the city council are not going to be automatically removed from the committee just because they decide to run again.
so we'll have to change that.
Are they on the committee?
Well, that's where you decide that tonight.
I was like, I didn't see those names on
Okay.
there.
Yeah, I think Mr. Huckabee is
One
on
name
there.
on it.
Mr. Huckabee's name is on that list right now. As I mentioned, that's a preliminary list for y'all to discuss and assess and appoint tonight, if you so choose.
So I have a so we need to decide on section, I'm okay with adding language that clarifies that the current city council members can actually run for office.
Yeah, I would just recommend just putting something excluding any current city council member or something along those lines to that,
And
that
we
language.
we could take action that listed that in the motion, and you could
Gotcha.
flesh that out.
Do that.
Correct.
Sounds- I have another question about section 5. It says a chair or a vice chair shall be appointed by the city council to preside over the meetings. One of my interests is I think we have an excellent group of people who have, of citizens who have volunteered, talented community members to work on this. I would like to leave them as much leeway as possible to choose their own leadership. I could see choosing possibly a chair, but not much beyond that, so that they can maybe even choose their own chair. I'm totally happy with giving them as much flexibility as possible. I know we chose for them last time because they hadn't been meeting, but this time, I believe all of the 3 council members, we did not choose new people this time. It's only the people who didn't choose members, so the committee stands as it is. except for the two new council people and their recommendations to add on. So it's a pretty stable committee. I'd like to give them as much leeway as possible in their choice of leadership. So
We,
I'm happy to, must be, sorry about that, my phone. But I'm happy to eliminate section 5 or, just choose the chair. It says a chair or a vice chair or whatever, just to give them flexibility.
And I would point out to the members of the council that the language here is primarily taken from the prior resolution. Again, we've made this one change that's been recommended, so if that needs to be changed, we can't, it's up to the council to make that determination at this point, but,
And I understand both sides of that issue, but the city council chose a great person, and she was a great leader. And I think she chose the vice. I don't think we just chose the,
we actually chose both of
Oh,
those.
okay.
We did.
but
And, go ahead.
no. Because I have another question if you want to go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, the reason why we chose the leadership is because the council's job is to choose the committee, and we decided that it was pertinent for us to decide because the committee itself is not creating the committee, we are. And that's why we added that language. I wholeheartedly believe that the council should be the ones determining both the chair and the vice chair. And when it comes time for a motion, I'm prepared to make a recommendation on that.
Well, this council didn't choose that committee. Some of you did, but a lot of that committee that came back was chosen by another city council.
that's correct.
Is that true?
That's correct.
Of whom 3 sit at this table.
Of whom 4 don't, I guess, so. It just seems to me that you're using, which I'm good with this committee, but there's lots of changes going on here, and all of a sudden, I would suggest that we have time to discuss this and put it off and think about it before we make this kind of decision.
The council could approve, if the council is, with those changes that have been recommended, can approve the resolution itself and decide on the latter part of that agenda item at a later date. So that's at the council's discretion, whether they want to appoint the membership at a later date, maybe have a workshop or something along those lines where they can discuss that and have a later meeting to approve that. I mean, that's in your discretion. Mr. Bolden?
First I want to verify the amount of members that's on this list. I was told it was 18, but I only can count up to 17. Because I had to add on to that question.
I think one additional member was added
Yeah, I have that.
after this was posted. Correct.
That's the printout list you have right there.
No, Ed Langley was left off for some reason, so he's
Yeah,
there.
I count 18 in the published document.
I think in the original, there may have been 17
Yeah,
there
the original
was-
one
that was
I
posted,
pulled off the agenda.
when the agenda was posted, yes.
And that, to me, is reason enough to put it off and discuss this.
And
Some of us may not know about it. You were wanting
yeah, and I
19.
don't have an argument with what he just said, mainly because I wanted to add additional names to it. I wanted to go to the 19, which the original committee was. I didn't have a problem with that. But I wanted to add 2 names that was represented in the Southeast Ward. Because there's no representative on this list from the Southeast Ward.
Okay, well, Mr. Bolden, there's 18 on there now, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. You had 19 on the original committee,
It originally was 21.
21, but we ended up with 19. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to get so far out there with this, where we've got members on top of members on top of members. That's my opinion. I'm ready to go on this. I think the clock's ticking. We've done the hard part, you know, we've passed the bond issue. Now it's time to go to work, you know, and get these people involved and get this thing going. So,
Are you saying that one additional person, if you go 20, is gonna clog up the system?
it could.
And
but-
originally we had 21, so you're not saying 20 would clog up?
Well, but at one, I wasn't
Are you
here.
saying we shouldn't have representation from all wards?
You had that opportunity when you did the original committee.
I was on there for the Southeast Ward,
Right. Okay.
but now we don't
Now
have.
you can be on there for the Southeast
No,
Ward.
that one won't. I've had, someone else need the opportunity to be part of this organization.
So, Mr. Bolden, who are your suggestions?
Sarah Catherine Duggins and Elizabeth Gadet.
And I'd like two more also. If I choose my three, I'd like five. Let's play this game.
So let me just clarify this, just so I understand how this list came. So what we did prior to this, we wanted the committee to stay intact as much as possible because they had already worked together and they'd done such a good job together. So my understanding was I wouldn't add any other names, or any of the people who had already put names on there would not add any others. The only people who were able to add names would be the mayor and Mr. Mall, because they had no people that they recommended to begin with. Is that, Mr. Johnson, am I right on that? I'm confused
That's what
about
I
this.
understood, and I only put two people on the committee.
You put two and.
put two
you
people.
And Mr. Mall, you put three? So leaving it intact plus their choices that's how we got to this, is that correct?
Well, the list, like, as I mentioned, was just those who responded favorably to Mr. Bartlett's when he reached out to those, the current existing members, or the prior members, I guess, because the committee had basically done what it was supposed to do and dissolved. So that's the bulk of that list that you see on Exhibit A. And the mayor and Councilman Mall proposed some additional names. And so when it was posted, that's what was put on that list at that time. There was no indication, at least when I prepared the resolution, there was no intention on my part to say that this is the definitive list. Rather that these are the ones that had been proposed and had responded from the prior committee that they were willing to serve. And so when the item was put on the agenda, part of the agenda item was for the council to discuss and appoint who was going to be on that membership. It didn't have to include anybody on this list if the council so chooses. But, I mean, it's really at your discretion who you want to be on this committee.
And we didn't I'm so sorry, we didn't remove any names that had been recommended by the last council that are.
The only names that were removed were those who said that they were not willing to serve any longer.
Well, let me make this perfectly clear. I don't have an issue with any name on here. I have an issue with names not on there. The list that's here, I mean, I think Nacogdoches, they work well together. They've done a great job, and the add-ons are just, I feel like they do a great job too. But
Understood.
So,
That's why I'm trying to get it to 19, and I've only got two people on here, so my third one is you.
Okay,
family say I stay away from home too much. Yes, now.
right.
Well,
I
if it's,
love him, Mr.
if
Did a good
that's,
job, Mr.
Bolden.
Bolden.
Yeah.
agree, and I want to make clear that I did not volunteer for this. I was sort of voluntold. I will make a motion that we adopt the resolution with the noted changes on the candidacy of members of the council on the committee, with the addition of Roy Bolden, with the chair as Dr. James Stanley and the vice chair as Dr. Margaret Forbes.
I'll second it.
Just a point of clarification. This says a chair or a vice chair. It doesn't say a chair and a vice chair, but is
My
that
motion
correct?
is to include the word "and" instead of "or."
James Stanley, and who was the vice?
Margaret Forbes.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? Have a motion and a second. I did. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign?
Nay.
Okay.
Nay.
Okay. It passes. Okay. Let's see, hang on just a minute. Okay. That concludes the regular, session of tonight's city council meeting, and pursuant to Texas Government Code, 551.074, we will convene in executive session at 6:40 PM. We'll be back in a minute. We're back from executive session at 8 PM. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074, no action taken. Therefore, this meeting, God bless the great city of Nacogdoches, Texas.